Welcome to the Gamification Quest podcast, brought to you by Sententia Gamification. I'm your host, Monica Cornetti, and here we dive deep into the transformative world of gamification. From our origins in 2014 as Gamification Talk Radio until now, our quest remains the same: to put an end to dry, dull, and ineffective corporate training and adult education. Because your learners deserve better. Are you ready? Let's get questing. Hey there, my name's Monica Cornetti, and I am your host for the Gamification Quest podcast. Now, today I have two really special guests, Jordan, who I just met, but I know that I will learn so much from her in the continuing time that we have and get to grow our relationship. So Jordan Dyson, and then Scott Provence, who I consider a member of the family. He has been with us from almost the very beginning, and we have learned so much from him. And he's always so generous and gracious with whatever knowledge he has, and fully supports what we're doing with our podcasts and our Gamicon and our Game Garage, you name it. Scott has been there as an inner circle family member. So they have a program that garnished for them a international award for two categories at Gamicon this past, just about a month ago in New Orleans. What were the two categories your project won?
Let's see. Yeah, thank you for having us. I think we won for best use of surprise and delight, one of my favorite mechanics. I know yours too, Monica, and best use of gamification theory.
Yes. Gamification theory. That's really good. That was a new category, not necessarily new, but just we branded it a little bit different. But they have a project called Walk With Me. And when Scott first emailed me and told me about Jordan and the project, I was like, this really needs to be put into the mix for the Throwdown competition. Now, Throwdown is something, just a little bit background for those of you who are listening. Gamicon is an annual event. We do it twice a year. We do one virtual in February. So starting on Leap Year Day 2024. So February 29th, we'll be kicking off. And that one, we go 48 hours around the globe with speakers we had 26 different countries last year, every continent except Antarctica. We had speakers and participants. And then we do a live event, and that is hosted for us by Training Magazine. And so they have been just huge supporters of ours since the very beginning. And we do a live event with their Tech Learn conference that typically falls in September, October. So in September, we were in New Orleans, and then September of 2024, we'll be back in Austin, Texas again for Tech Learn and Gamicon. So as part of Gamicon Live, we do a throwdown competition. And this is for anyone who's done a learning project that is gamified or game-based for adult learning. They can enter it, and there's a number of different categories for which they can win these different awards that come from Training Magazine then. The bad thing for me is I don't get to get involved in it at all. I don't even really review the projects because I don't want there to be any appearance of any kind of impropriety or me selecting friends over right. I don't even get to see the projects. I'm not allowed. Like, one of the hotel people tried to give me keys to where the judges' private chambers were, where they were doing their voting. And I was like, no, don't even give me the keys. I don't want to go back there. So this Walk With Me project, it just blew people's minds. So let me give you a little bit of background on it. I don't want to just gush because that's just embarrassing for everyone. And so let's just get to it, right? So let me give you a background. A wealth management firm was looking for ways to improve their organizational culture and address risks of declining client service quality. So Jordan and Scott created this two-step game-based solution. The first, the employees played a turn-based conversation game with an AI-powered chatbot, which I love. And then they attended a live 50-minute session where they did a debrief and some additional review of what they had learned to really help that learning to hook in place. The program results showed double-digit improvement in evidence-based empathizing skills and participant mindset. So not only were the employees exhibiting more empathetic behaviors, but their beliefs around their potential to enhance these abilities also saw measurable improvement over the course of the program, which is so great because, I talk about our ability to learn. So much of that is based on the belief of whether I even can or not. Like, how can I be more empathetic? I don't know. Maybe I don't even have that capability, but the belief that I could is a huge, huge plus in creating the program. Let me give you a little bit of background on Jordan and Scott, then we'll get started. Jordan has defined her career by building connections between initiatives, ideas, technologies, and people. She's got nearly a decade in financial services and a foundational skill set in organizational communication and development. Scott's a health tech leader and content developer whose print and web-based curricula have served millions annually across the world. Scott has worked in both public and private sectors, creating federal education programs and leading L&D teams from small startups to Google. Jordan's working on a Master of Science in Learning and Organizational Change from Northwestern University. Really good, Jordan. Congratulations on that. I know that's a lot of hard work. Together, Jordan and Scott, and I did not know this, I went out to look at the website. Nicely done. It's called Understories. So that's UNDERSTORIES, understories.us. It's an experience design studio specializing in learning, development, and organizational change. So these two are pretty much unstoppable from what I've been able to see so far. And they're nice people, which that's kind of rare to find that kind of combination, right? They're just really great people. So let's start with who came up with this idea? How did this idea for this particular game come up?
Yeah, so I can get us started. And Monica, thank you so much for having us. It's super exciting to be able to talk a little bit about the Understories origin story and the work we're doing, the way that we think about organizational change and behavior change. And so how I found Scott and how we kind of jumped into this project, I was asked to develop a L&D program for my firm. And we knew that we wanted this program to not just encompass role-based training and technical skills, but it needed to include soft skills, or what we tend to call competence in organizational and relational effectiveness. And so one of our leaders asked me, this is great, like we want a holistic program, but how exactly do you plan to teach some of these things? We don't necessarily believe that you can just teach people how to be empathetic or how to communicate. Some of these things are just harder to impart on people. And so I was like, that's a great question. I'm going to figure it out, but I'm convinced that it can be done. And so I started following a bunch of LinkedIn influencers, if you call them influencers, I don't know, people in the L&D space who talked about L&D a lot. And one of them happened to make a post about failure one day. And it was really interesting because I was just telling our leadership team, we've got to figure out ways to allow our people to fail as they're learning. And so I was really mulling that over that day. He posted that about failure. And then Scott was tagged in that post and happened to chime in and said much more eloquently than I had earlier that day, but basically the same thought that I had, that we've got to figure out how to lay the groundwork for that psychological safety that allows people to feel comfortable to try and to fail and to learn. And so I think I liked his post and said, wow, that's so well said. And then he connected with me and was like, what are you working on? It's like, well, funny you ask. I'm working on a lot. And so from there, we just started talking about L&D and AI and a bunch of other random things that we were learning and interested in. And I had shared with him that one of the things on my roadmap for the year was to plan out a conference where we wanted to have live sessions that taught some soft skills, specifically empathy and communication. And so he very graciously and generously was like, oh, well, I'd love to help with that. And so I was like, okay, well, let's think through like what that could look like. And we tried some things and then some things didn't quite work out. And we was like, okay, we've got to figure out like, what's the path forward that's within our skill set and within our scope, knowing that we only had a few months to build. And from there is kind of where Walk With Me came. I cut out a lot of the detail there because that would have been a long and winding road. But Scott, is there anything you would add to the story?
I have so much gratitude that we got to meet. Similar to how I met Monica, I'm amazed with the network of people, how giving people are with their time, how smart people are. So yeah, again, just to be in the room with both of you again reminds me of how grateful I am. And amazing things have happened, and I can't wait to see what we do next. And it's been a dream. This program has been so much fun, and it's really fun to share it with folks now.
And
Absolutely.
so I'm trying to think of the books right here, and I was wanting to look because I usually keep it right next to me, but
Oh,
I think I did a cleanup and moved books back to the library. But very modestly, Scott is not mentioning his book. That if you're an L&D professional and you do not have this book, you need to get it. That's all I have to say. And there's no ifs, ands, or but, and it's in everybody's budget. And if it's not in your budget, let me know and we'll make it happen for you, right? I mean, you can afford this book. It's called Fail to Learn, and it is like mind blowing. And it's so interesting because there's two parts that's interesting that I learned from Scott's book. First off, as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, that's not true. That's not real. Scott's just making that up. And so it's all this information about the need to learn and how much people learn better. And the second part that was interesting on that is that the more confident you are that you are right when your answer is wrong, the more that you'll actually remember that when it gets corrected. And as I learned that and thought, well, I guess I just need to read Scott's book and quit arguing with him while I'm reading it and learn from it. But what's so interesting is I have these pivotal moments of my career where I would have bet everything that I was right and I was wrong. But I sure remember those, right? It's so
yep.
cool of how to apply it. And the important part of the book is that we need to allow our learners to fail. And I think that's one area that in L&D we tend to fail, is that we want to kind of spoon feed it. Like we don't want to make it too hard. Like let's not make it. And no one learns at all that way. When we just
Yeah.
give you you can't learn. You're not challenged. There's no risk involved. So it's just,
Yeah.
again, it's called Fail to Learn, Scott Provence. Order it today. You will thank me and thank Scott for that. Talk to me about AI. So you were really gutsy in this. You were talking to us about this before people were really
Yeah.
talking about. And I'm like, what's Scott doing now? Because he's always a little bit ahead. So you used chat. You had a
Mhm.
chat bot. What made you bring AI into this? How did you get started in that direction?
Yeah. This is obviously it's such a hot topic right now, and there's so much going on. People are trying to catch up, also realizing maybe I've overstepped, and how do I walk it back? How do I make sure that I'm kind of putting the right frameworks in place? And these are the conversations I think Jordan and I have been having with folks. I think they will continue to happen this year and next, and let's keep them going. I think if anyone is listening to this and thinking, I wonder if I should get into it, answer is yes. Start having the conversations, if nothing else, because we're learning so much about them. And so that's a lot of what Jordan and I were talking about in this program. What we realized is there were a couple of layers and levels we could put to this program involving artificial intelligence. The first thing we realized is when it comes to measuring soft skills, and again, kind of a clunky term, I love the way Jordan described it, the competence in organizational and relational effectiveness, a much better framework for understanding things like empathy, communication, leadership, um, recognizing that those things are really traditionally hard to define. And so how do we define that? How do we start putting some hard data to that? And one of the things I like about artificial intelligence is it's built up with these algorithmic frameworks. And at its core, an algorithm just means a procedure for solving something. And if we force ourselves to think like computers and think in algorithmic terms, like what is that step-by-step procedure, and applying that thinking to something as potentially large as leadership or empathy, if we really start to encourage ourselves that do that step-by-step thinking, we can actually build some rules and understandings of how to measure things like empathy. And so we can measure things like who's talking more in a conversation, and what does speaking versus listening have to do with empathizing? What types of questions are you asking? Are they closed-ended that someone can only say yes or no, or are they open-ended that invite conversation? These are things that a machine learning algorithm can measure. And if we start to learn those things in our own conversations, we can actually change how we speak and become more empathetic. So a lot of those rules and ways of thinking go into the core of our program. And then to your point, we realized that one of the other ways we could use some of these new technologies is to create a outer wraparound layer of GPT integration, where rather than feeding in your client conversations, which maybe is not only deals with patient protection issues, but also is very nerve-wracking that you don't want to be graded on live conversations yet. Maybe just feeding in some fictionalized conversations with GPT. And so we created this wrapper, and we'll get more into how we deploy this as a game, where you can have a conversation with a fictionalized character, and that lowers the stakes a little bit, and you can feel a little bit more comfortable with, here's Erin, she's having a hard day, she's a GPT prompt, but you don't have to think about that right now. Have a conversation, try to be empathetic. If it didn't work, try it again. It's not going to hurt Erin's feelings, and you can practice some of these skills in a live setting without it being a real person.
Well, and that's, again, when we go back to, we think about the threats that are involved in learning, and that we know that we know that we know that's one of that whole, the poison words of role playing. But we know that that's one of the most effective ways to practice the skill set,
It's
is
true.
to practice the skill set, right?
Yeah.
And not with somebody who's just going to say, okay, thank you for correcting me. That's going to really help me be
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah.
That's not real life. They're going to
Yeah.
fight you every step of the way because we're asking somebody to make a change or to do
Yeah.
something they feel inconvenienced by, or whatever that is. And so when you think about the power of try it, what didn't work,
Yeah.
and try it again. Because the one thing that like, because I was just teaching this week, I'm on faculty for an organization. I won't, but when we start practicing, the words always sound so different out here than they did in
Yeah.
our head. And so we try that and we see what the effect, the outcome of that is. And then we think, okay, how could I re-say that? Because when I'm teaching people about communication, one of the things is that I don't mind directness. In fact, I like directness because I don't have to wonder, what are you really saying? But there's also probably 12 different ways we could say something to
Yeah.
still be direct without crossing some lines
Yeah.
of aggression and yes, and manipulation. So this is really fun.
Yeah.
Did you, when you were thinking about with the business, Jordan, how open were they to this idea? Because it's not just a small walk to get here. It's interesting, and the use of the technology. I sometimes I work with different government entities, and I feel like they put the crucifix up when I start talking about chat with them. This is evil, evil. And I'm like, is it really? But so what kind of barriers was it a barrier to overcome to start using the AI, or were they all in?
Yeah, so I don't know if I would say all in, but they were cautiously optimistic that we'd be able to give them the results that they wanted. So they're like, we haven't been able to do it to this point. So sure, let's run this experiment, see if it works the way that we think it would. And honestly, I would say the barriers were less AI driven, though of course we did have to like come to some agreement about like, okay, is any client information going in here?
Right,
Like, is it
right.
all that kind of stuff? Understandable, of course. But it was less so about the AI and more it was mindset based were a lot of the challenges, because folks assumed like, oh, you can't train for empathy. Like, how exactly do you plan to do that? Are you gonna like, what are you gonna put in that PowerPoint presentation that's gonna get people to act differently? And so it was like, all right, well, we're not gonna put it in the PowerPoint presentation, or maybe we will, plus something else where people can actually try and experience it themselves. So honestly, a lot of it was just them trusting me for a few months and then letting me play around a little bit and experiment with their teams. Because at that point, I was like, well, I don't know how much we have to lose here. Role plays haven't been working, PowerPoints haven't been working. Let's be open to trying something new. And so I just really appreciated that they were able to kind of step in there with that mindset of like, we're going to try something and just see what works. So
Yeah.
one, getting past that initial thought of you can't train for this was something that we had to work through. But two, I think when you're talking about things like good communication or good empathy, folks automatically assume that they are good at that, or at least better than average. And so you really have to come against that bias and get people to realize that like, hey, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. One interesting thing that, just as we've been talking about the Walk With Me framework with folks, is that normally the people who will come to us to say, like, we want to roll this out at our company will say, I really noticed in my team, not me personally, but in my team, that these folks really have a problem with empathy. And so we've got to bring you in to help them learn how to be more empathetic, maybe like myself. And so it's like, okay, it's so interesting that we can't see that deficiency in ourselves. And so one of the things that was really important to Scott and I as we were designing was thinking through how can we get people to embrace more intellectual humility around the idea of empathy and their skill set as it relates to empathy and communication. And so that definitely informed how we approached rolling out the program, how we approached the information that we gave people ahead of trying it. I think my initial tendency was like, oh, we should maybe give some folks some tips about what good empathy looks like and all of that. And I'm pretty sure Scott said, let's just let them try.
We have to, yeah, let's let them try first. Yeah, that's always a lot more fun the other way. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
But
I
that,
think about and just the beauty of even using AI for the conversations, because I'm thinking about that lowering the resistance, right? Like
Hmm.
if Scott or Jordan tells me I could have done, like I give you feedback, here's what I
Hmm.
observed, here's what I really like best. Next time you might want to consider, I can see me given some pushback, like, oh, really? Is that what you really
Hmm.
think? But if it's
Yeah.
coming from this entity, that the
Hmm.
entity is the one that's coaching you, that's a lot less risky as far as me being open to the idea that maybe there is some things I need to learn here. I
Yeah.
think that's really insightful, Jordan. Very good.
Yeah.
very,
I like it a lot. When I know that I heard conversation, because one of the things that we do at GameCon with the Throwdown is the people like Jordan and Scott, they've sent in a submission months in advance. The judges have been evaluating it. Then they do a presentation live at GameCon, and then we let the participants at GameCon walk around and ask questions because everyone's so curious. This is like the favorite part of GameCon is when people get to talk to the Throwdown participants. And I heard some conversation, and I heard both of you say that initial response from people that is that this is hard. And
Mm-hmm.
typically, again, as L&D professionals, we try and spoon feed. So when you got this is hard, did you go back to the drawing table, or how'd you handle that?
Yeah, that was such an interesting, and obviously for any L&D designers listening, we're such iterative developers, and that's a great thing. And, to your point, you get this feedback of, I didn't like this. This was really difficult. The reaction is like, oh my gosh, we messed up. Let's
Yeah, we
go
gotta
back
go
to
make it
square one.
easy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
turn it
yeah,
around. Yeah.
yeah.
And so to your point, and I'm glad we was able to have some of this research to fall back on to remind myself and ourselves, like, you know what? What if we lean into this failure a bit more? And what if rather than trying to change the system, we help audiences recognize that it's okay to get something wrong and you don't have to get it right the first try or even the second try. And this is where I think the beauty of gamification comes in. Without getting on too big of a soapbox, we as most individuals, especially those brought up in 20th century US education models, we are terrified of failure because the way we've been taught is always, let's teach you the right answer and only remember that right answer. Don't ever get it wrong. And that's not the way people learn. And we know the science shows us that that's not the best way for people to learn. And yet that's how our society often teaches. The one spot where it's okay to fail is in games. And in fact, a game without failure is a really boring game. And so when Jordan and I were building this and recognizing, hey, we've got this really great algorithm, it is very good at showing people that they actually are pretty bad at empathy. And it won't beat around the bush with that. You feed in a transcript and it'll spit it back out and say, you did about 3% of this right. We realized that if we just gave people these responses, yeah, the reaction is, I didn't like this. This was hard. This was wrong. I'm not going to engage. So recognizing that using a game-based training approach was going to be one of the best ways to do this of, hey, this is a challenging level, or you're walking along with this character and you are trying to make their day brighter. And whatever you're doing right now is making the day darker. See if you can play around with this and what you can change. And the way we wrapped around that objective, data-driven algorithmic feedback in more of a game setting, I think made that failure, it turned it from a very negative experience into, oh, this is a great driver for a game. And we had people, they would go through and play once and I'd get a little ping that a new person had played. And then all of a sudden I'd get 10 more pings that this person kept jumping in because they kept playing and losing this game. And rather than disengaging, they were actually saying, I'm hooked now. I want to keep learning.
What I love about that too is like when we have an L&D initiative, we're going to have this course in empathy, and everyone's like,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and how long is that going to take? And it's that time I'm never going to see back in my life ever again. So we've got this resistance because it's just another L&D idea,
Mhm.
not, but that's how it's perceived. And then, so they don't have time. I don't have time to do this, but then they have time to stay in there and try it again and try it
Yeah.
again and try it again and try. And
Right.
that's when we're on to something, because I didn't
Yeah.
have time to do this, but I'm not walking away until I get this right. So,
That's
which is a
right.
lot different than get this done.
Yeah.
Those are two different, completely different goals.
Yep.
I'm not just trying to get this done. I'm trying to get this right. And I'm not
Mhm.
quitting until I do. That's really
Mhm.
huge.
Mhm.
How are you evaluating? And you might have been evaluating differently than the company was.
Mhm.
So either way you want to present, how were you evaluating the success?
Yeah, there were a couple different levels of evaluation there. So there was, yeah, Scott and mine with their pre-survey and post-survey, where we were trying to measure mindset around folks' capacity to grow in empathy, or where they thought they might have excelled or not excelled in empathy. And so it was really interesting from our surveys to see that there was measurable growth in their belief that they could grow in empathy, which was just phenomenal. So we asked, I can improve my ability to communicate empathetically. That jumped from 85 to 95%. And that was in the course of about 2.5-ish weeks, I think, for this particular group. Yeah, their belief that others could grow, that it wasn't a fixed trait that was attached to your personality. It was just really fascinating to see that evolve over time. But then also through the game, that the empathy algorithm that Scott was referencing on the back end was monitoring and watching through those transcripts how folks were doing. And so they could compare from one play to the next. Oh, I got 75% listening time on this first playthrough, but then it jumped up to 81% by the second playthrough, or that kind of thing. We did have a couple different levels of monitoring for how folks were doing and how they were growing as they played the game. Anything you would add, Scott?
Yeah, just and being such a huge data nerd, like that's my favorite thing. And I think having the game framework really helped people from getting too lost in the numbers so they could kind of see on screen how I'm doing and get even little visual cues. But then, and especially when you're trying to make this proof of concept to the leadership level, to be able to take
Mhm.
the hard data afterwards and say, hey, everyone had fun with this. They played it 10 times when they only needed to play it once. But all of that aside, look at the hard numbers of what we're seeing here. We can see the use of someone's ability to know what an open-ended question is, but then to go from X number of percent using it to a double-digit increase after a couple hours of training and playthrough time. That's what I think makes the C-suite really sit up and say, "Oh, can we do this now for everyone? Because if this is quantifiable, we need to roll it out."
And you do, and every organization in the world needs this. Not to be too grandiose here, you two, but I do, again, because I'm on faculty for an organization. My focus is always in that either executive leadership or new managers and just working on some skill development. But we know Gallup research shows us, and there's one of my favorite books, not because of how interesting the read is, but because of the data in there, is It's the Manager by Jim Clifton, the CEO of Gallup. And we know that the number one reason that people are leaving organizations is because of the manager. And
Mhm.
it goes back to what Jordan, you were saying earlier. It's not, I don't need to learn this. My people need to learn this,
Right.
right? And evidently not. Evidently it is. And so when we see, this is reproducible. It doesn't matter what the industry is. It doesn't matter if it's a mining company, a healthcare organization, a bank, retail. It doesn't matter, because people are people, no matter where we're working, what the industry is. So I just think you guys have really, really hit onto something super huge. So where do you see, like, what's next? Where do you want to go with
Mhm.
this? Is it understories, or you'll be
Yeah.
taking, so yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to draw the path, you draw.
Well, yeah, having the chance to do this with such a great partner in Jordan is, again, just that's all I could have asked for and hoped for by itself. But to have some of these now interests and conversations, we're so excited to be talking with folks, and it's been one of my highlights of every week since we've launched this, and since coming out of GameCon and TechLearn, that Jordan and I have been able to sit down with different organizations, different industries, and people saying, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this, and can I bring this into my company or my organization? And to your point, one of the things we really appreciate about Walk With Me is that it does translate really well, that we can take the core of this program, this game, we can tailor the GPT integration so that the character is presenting a specific wealth management problem or a healthcare problem or a sales problem. And it's been really fun to talk with folks and have them recognize and connect the dots. Hey, this one thing that has always been in our training program as a soft skill or as a leadership skill or as a DEI competency or as a manager training, we've always used it. We don't really know how success is supposed to be measured. Can you help us with that? And so, yeah, bringing this specific product in, but then also having the larger conversations of what are you trying to train on? How are you measuring that? And how can we help you create some more quantifiable and enjoyable metrics for that?
So let me just make sure I understand. The format of this was they did the first part of it asynchronously. They
Hmm.
sat down, right? And
Yeah,
so, and then you pulled everybody together.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of this combination of, yeah, let's the asynchronous part is could be as short as 5 minutes of log into a site, here's a game's gonna pop up, have a conversation, get some feedback, maybe get a little confused or frustrated that you didn't do so well, and then that'll give you more encouragement to meet up next week when we all meet virtually or in person, and
Right.
let's talk through what this looked like, and let's do some extra activities or role play exercises, and then we're gonna let you go back out to your own role, to your back home, play this game one more time, take another 5-minute pass at this, and let's see if you can apply some of those skills, and maybe even play it again a month later, and let's see if those skills are continuing to work for you. And we can do that through the game. We can even take those algorithms and apply them to real conversations, and start
Yeah.
to see how these metrics improve.
Yeah. I mean, everything, customer service, coaching, performance reviews,
Yeah,
performance improvement plans. I mean, you name it. Anytime like we put that label of a difficult conversation. Uh,
yeah,
and they're difficult because we don't know the right thing to say,
yeah,
and how can we practice, and it's different, it'll
yeah,
always be, there's no do these three things.
yeah,
uh so understories.us, you just are wide open to where can we grow with this.
yeah. We are open to the conversations, and we are, I should also say, learning so much from folks as we're talking. There are so many great initiatives out there that one of the things we've been enjoying also is just connecting other people. The amount of interactions and conversations we're getting, I think, is really opening others' eyes to the fact that these are projects that we should be pursuing. And I think people are getting excited about the idea that I don't just need to recycle last year's empathy presentation, or I just have to dust back off, oh, we're going to do DEI training again, let's do the same thing that we've always done. These are things that we are empowering ourselves and others to take ownership of. And this is some of the most important program work you could be doing with your organizations. Let's help you do it.
Yeah, very good, really good. Jordan, what am I missing that you want to make sure that we talk about as far as your program or the design?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that anything's missing other than I would just add that we're so excited to keep having these conversations to talk about the different areas where Walk With Me can be used, where any other experiential learning interventions can be used. It's not just empathy, it's communication, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion work. It's strategic thinking, innovation. We've been approached by so many different folks looking to hone in on a variety of these different soft skills. And you can apply different experiential learning frameworks to all of these things. And so we're just super excited to be nerdy with folks, help to quantify things that are more qualitative, and yeah, want to have the conversation. So I would hope folks
Yeah.
would.
And I love the title so much. It's kind of like got a little place in my heart. Well, I was the administrator of a large not-for-profit for 10 years. And so I was like the person that had the buck stopped with me for approval on things. And so I would have those conversations. Like people would come and say, I need to talk to you about X. And I'd say, walk with me. So we
Mm.
would walk and they would talk. And our agreement was, even if while we're walking and I say, that sounds really great, that's not approval. That's just me affirming, that sounds really great. Now let's make sure we do the proper steps to get the timeline, the budget and everything. But that was just, I was like, walk with me. Yeah, talk, let's talk. Tell me about it. So that, because it helped us to think and generate ideas and just have that conversation one-on-one with each other. So I love the title when I saw it, and I love the program. And of course, I am just so excited for the two of you winning the double award, which has never been done before. And then this makes you a threefer. Is that right, Scott?
It was lucky
Three
enough a
times.
few years back to win one. That's right.
Yeah. And when the awards are nice, of course, we like awards. They're great. It's not the fact that it won awards. It's fact that there was a jury of your peers that evaluated the effectiveness of the program, what you said it did, and really, really dug into it to see, does this really have the goods? And then evaluated that yes, it does. That's when we talk about designing award-winning programs, that's what I'm looking for, that we've unpacked it, really looked at it from all sides, and then evaluated that this is something that's really worthy of further exploration and use by so many different entities. So we wish you the very best.
Well, thank you so much for having us. One quick plug, just as Monica was mentioning the Throwdown Awards, if those listening out there have projects or programs that they're interested, check out Sententia, check out the GameCon annual conference. The Throwdowns participants every year, the programs, every application is amazing and blows me away. Even just seeing from a few years back to this year, it's incredible. And also, like you said, the awards are incredible. And just besides that, the judges' feedback for every program, the hours that they put into giving expert level feedback is worth it just by itself. So thank you again for creating the community that does that.
Yes, and
sorry, Jared, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this was my first GameCon, and I was completely blown away by just the community and the care, the personal care that people showed for me, who was a complete outsider, complete newbie. I walked away with so many friends that I now even check in with on a weekly basis now, which is just, you don't get that at every professional conference. You just don't. You don't get that at most professional conferences. So Monica, is just a beautiful community that you've grown here. And thank you for walking me into it.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, we do. It is a fantastic community. It really does not have this feeling of one-upmanship. Like, I just got to show everybody else how smart I am. We don't have that. It's more like, how can what do you know? What do I know? How can we make this work? We have three things. We have being grateful, being gracious, and being generous. And those are our kind of three, the triangle that we build on at Sententia. And we see that time and time again in the community. And I wanted to say, Scott, when I saw the presentations, which is really my first view of the projects, each one, I was like, damn, that was really good. Damn, that was really good. I wouldn't want to be next. Damn, I wouldn't want to be next to that. Yeah, I mean, because they were so good.
Everyone was. They really were.
Yeah, really good. Kudos to you both. I look forward to hearing great things about both of you, and connect with them. They're both on LinkedIn, and they're both hugely generous and smart, and can connect you with information that they know. And if they don't know, they'll find somebody who does know. So thanks for being here as my guest. I really appreciate you. And for those of you listening, be sure and check back, because we'll have another episode of the Gamification Quest podcast coming your way soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been an episode of the Gamification Quest, brought to you by Sententia Inc. If you enjoyed this presentation, click the thumbs up button below and share your comments. If you'd like to stay in the conversation, click subscribe and ring the bell. You'll be alerted when another episode is released, or when we upload an informative video on the gamification of learning. And thanks for all you do to put an end to dull, dry, boring learning experiences.